the latest fad, now this one is talking about, I had to look back to find this article because it fits right in with this one about the Christmas trees. It says the latest fad among biologists is called synthetic biology. And of course, what synthetic biology is, it extends their work even beyond the concerns now of genetically modified GMO foods. They want to design new strands of DNA into sequences that result in totally man-made viruses, no part being derived from DNA sequences found in this nature. Found in nature, I mean. Keep in mind, even with regulations in place, GMO, it's quite a coincidence because they call this tree a Franken tree, like Frankenstein. Okay, well, see, it fits right in because let me go ahead with it. Even with the regulations in place, GMO Franken foods have crept into the food chain. Even with regulations in place, bees cross-pollinate GMO crops with natural varieties. GMO foods have been developed with a good intent, it says, to develop crops that resist insect attacks, but may result in upsetting the food chain. British researchers recently counted fewer bees and butterflies in the GMO crops. Proceeding Biology Science, 2005, March the 7th, despite public objection, GMO soy and corn have been consumed by humans without proper labeling and notification. Will newly designed biology systems made by synthetic biologists secretly be replaced for use, as has GMO viruses can be used as victors, that is, vehicles, to secretly vaccinate human populations without ever sticking a needle in them. Now, what synthetic biology poses is more outrageous and dangerous than GMO crops. They can place an order to build whole new viruses from synthetic DNA by simply ordering viral DNA from a genetic census company. Well, what they've done, of course, is trying to save the trees. Now they've run into a big block here because every time they do something, every time they use something, sprays or pesticides of any kind, the environment becomes stronger than the killer, and this kingdom of microorganisms, they take in this, and some survive, and of course they rebreed, and they come drug resistant. That's what is taking place on the drug market too. So they're trying to find something that when the bug eats the tree, the bug dies. Now the aphids, this will kill them. It'll also kill the ladybugs, and supposedly the bees and the butterflies and things that cross-pollinate the crops. But also anything that takes this pollen to another location, then this genie that they've released from the bottle has spread some more.
In 1845, Ireland's vast potato fields were struck by an invasive fungal disease that rapidly infested this staple crop. The effect was devastating. 1 million people died of famine, and over 1 million more were forced to leave Ireland. Nowadays, we avoid such agricultural catastrophes with the help of pesticides. Those are a range of man-made chemicals that control insects, unwanted weeds, funguses, rodents, and bacteria that may threaten our food supply. They've become an essential part of our food system. As populations have grown, monoculture, single-crop farming, has helped us feed people efficiently. But it's also left our food vulnerable to extensive attack by pests. In turn, we've become more dependent on pesticides. Today, we annually shower over 5 billion pounds of pesticides across the earth to control these unwanted visitors. The battle against pests, especially insects, has marked agriculture's long history. Records from thousands of years ago suggest that humans actively burned some of their crops after harvest to rid them of pests. There's even evidence from ancient times that we recruited other insects to help. In 300 AD, Chinese farmers specially bred ferocious predatory ants in orange orchards to protect the trees from other bugs. Later, as large-scale farming spread, we began sprinkling arsenic, lead, and copper treatments on crops. But these were incredibly toxic to humans as well. As our demand for more, safer produce increased, so did the need for effective chemicals that could control pests on a grander scale. Sorry,
not chemical. It's not chemical. That's what science uses. You don't have any chemicals in your body. If you do, they're not supposed to be there.
This ushered in the era of chemical pesticides. In 1948, a Swiss chemist named Paul Hermann Müller was awarded a Nobel Prize for his discovery of dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane, also known as DDT. This new molecule had unparalleled power to control many insect species until the 1950s, when insects became resistant to it. Worse, the chemical actually drove dramatic declines in bird populations, poisoned water sources, and was eventually found to cause long-term health problems in humans. By 1972, DDT had been banned in the United States, and yet traces still linger in the environment today. Since then, chemists have been searching for alternatives. With each new wave of inventions, they've encountered the same obstacle: rapid species evolution. As pesticides destroy pest populations, they leave behind only the most resistant individuals. They then pass on their pesticide-resisting genes to the next generation. That's led to the rise of superbugs, such as the Colorado potato beetle, which is resistant to over 50 different insecticides. Another downside is that other bugs get caught in the crossfire. Some of these are helpful predators of plant pests, or vital pollinators, so erasing them from agriculture wipes out their benefits too. Pesticides have improved over time and are currently regulated by strict safety standards, but they still have the potential to pollute soil and water, impact wildlife, and even harm us. So considering all these risks, why do we continue using pesticides?
I've gone through these articles and I'm just trying to get what will show you that science is backing up what Yahweh says now, because they've got powerful telescopes. They've got where they can magnify this, thousands and thousands of times. They can take moving pictures of it. It says, but what they're doing now, they're finding this in the blood now, and this is never before have they seen the bacteria and stuff that we have in our blood today. And of course, there's a reason for it. The reason for it, we're putting it there through the foods we eat. Chemicals, too, that doesn't really belong in the body. We're finding those in the body. In fact, babies are being born with some 300 different chemicals in their blood already. In the umbilical cord, this is found in the blood of the umbilical cord. So it's in the mother as well as the baby. This is the reason that we're seeing sickness increase, we're seeing confusion increase, but the Scripture points this out. It points it out how the confusion takes place, and the instruction that Yahweh gives you to keep this from taking place with you.
There's many diseases that are linked to glyphosate exposure, including non-alcoholic fatty liver cancers are very closely linked. A lot of kidney diseases, and then severe damage to the microbiome, because it's designed to kill plants, and there are structures in your gut biome that are critical structures in your gut biome, which have plant-like metabolisms which are destroyed by glyphosate. And so, what happened is glyphosate was originally developed as a tank scalant. So to scale the calcium and other deposits, metal deposits, rust deposits from the inside of, underground tanks. And in 1973, Monsanto had to stop producing DDT because, we passed the laws at that time, and that was its flagship product. It needed another product. And it figured out that glyphosate, somebody at some point apparently threw some glyphosate on the, out in the back in the yard, and everything green died where they touched it, where it touched the glyphosate. And so somebody said, oh, this will be a good herbicide because it kills all plants. So originally, Monsanto developed it as an herbicide, but the way that it was applied initially from 1973 to 1993 was in backpack sprayers. So guys would walk down the corn rows early in the season when the corn was competing with nearby weeds for sunlight, and they would shoot the individual weeds. And then in 93, somebody figured out a way that glyphosate, there was certain bacteria that glyphosate would not kill. And they said we could take a gene out of that bacteria and put it into a corn seed and develop a corn that cannot be killed by glyphosate. So they developed Roundup Ready corn. And that corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it and it will do nothing to it. So now you could fire all of those workers who were expensive, and you hire one airplane and they fly over the fields. They saturate the entire landscape with glyphosate. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn. And within a couple of years, Roundup Ready corn was now 90% of the corn, 95% of the corn in the United States is now Roundup Ready corn. And so, but it was still being, and then they developed it for soybean and for barley, for sorghum, for a lot of other plants. But it was still being applied early in the season. And then in around 2006, they discovered that if you sprayed it on wheat late in the season, it would desiccate the wheat. In other words, it would dry it out. And one of the big losses for farmers in wheat is if it rains during the harvest season, you can't harvest it because it gets moldy. And so if you can spray a desiccant on it and dries it out and kills it, you can harvest it right away and it won't get moldy. So all the wheat in our country started being sprayed that year in 2006 with glyphosate, and that's the year you saw this explosion of celiac diseases and gluten allergies and all of this stuff that people that you may have noticed around then.
But they also did.
The first time they were, first time they're spraying it directly on food, because it used to be they were spraying it early in the season. And it would, it would wash off, and the corn would get higher than the weeds, and you wouldn't have to do it. But now they're spraying it directly on our food. Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. So, when they started doing this, there's a direct result? Like you can see the increase in celiac disease. You can see. Is this like documented?
Well, no. These are. No, that's not documented.
Not documented.
But there's a whole range of diseases that are now, that people that science, different levels of science have linked to glyphosate exposure. Here's the thing: when you litigate, when you're suing somebody for a chemical exposure, you have to go through a threshold called the Daubert hearing, and the Daubert hearing is a hearing that says, is there sufficient science that it's now considered kind of mainstream that we can show this to a jury? And the judge has to make that decision, because the judge doesn't want people saying, coming in and saying, a loud noises made me crazy.
Right.
Right. There has to be before, and then a good attorney might be able to convince a jury that my client got crazy because he heard a loud noise. So the judge needs to make a threshold decision about whether there's sufficient science to show a jury, and that is a very high threshold. So of all of the diseases that are probably almost certainly caused by glyphosate, the only one to pass that threshold was the case that we brought for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So at that point, we had enough rat studies, enough human studies. We had about 10 of each. And we were able to go to the judge and say, we got enough science on this now to show that it's that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is being caused by glyphosate. So those were the only cases we brought. The other thing, but there are a lot of really interesting studies that show links between injuries to children and the amount of glyphosate in a woman's urine and the mother's urine, including a lot of sexual development. It's an endocrine disruptor. So,
similar to phthalates.
Phthalates are an endocrine disruptor. Probably the most disturbing endocrine disruptor, and this is something we should all be looking at, is atrazine.
Yeah. Because
atrazine, which is now ubiquitous, it's everywhere. But you can take atrazine, and what is his name?
Jamie.
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 You can look up. You can look up this study. I think the scientist's name is Tyler, I think, and that might be his first or second name. But they took atrazine and they put it in a tank with 40 frogs for 3 years. They put it below the exposure levels that EPA considers acceptable to humans. And 30 of those frogs, they were all male frogs, and they were double Z, male frogs, so they were super males. And 30 of those frogs were chemically castrated. 4 of them turned into females and produced fertile eggs. So they took male frogs, gave them atrazine, 10% of them turned into female and produced fertile eggs. And we're subjecting our children to exposure to that every day.
What is atrazine?
It's in the water. It's a pesticide.
Here it is. Report toxic herbicide found in many Texans' drinking water. That's it. That's from 2018, November 20th.
Yeah, and what does this do to sexual development in children? Nobody knows, because we know what it does to frogs.
Neonicotinoid pesticides are a neurotoxic insecticide targeting the receptor sites in insect nerves that cause all sorts of damage to their bodily function.
The problem with that is once you target the nervous system of an insect, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not doing damage to other larger species.
We're all exposed to neonics. CDC monitoring shows that on any given day, about half the American population has neonics in their bodies, with the highest levels in children. That's concerning because studies suggest people exposed to neonics in the womb are at higher risk of birth defects and neurological harms. Animal studies also link neonics to reproductive problems and thinning of key areas of the brain.
The problem with neonicotinoids is threefold. It can last for a long time in soils. That means when it rains, it spreads. It's very mobile in water. So once the chemical gets into, whether it's a drinking water supply or a marine environment, it spreads and is mobile in the water. When you use neonicotinoids or neonics on plants or coat the seeds, it becomes what's called systemic. It really becomes in the system of the plant, and it goes into the fruit. So if you're eating fruit that was grown with a seed covered with a neonic pesticide, the pesticide is actually in the flesh of the fruit.
Neonics are incredibly toxic to bees and other insects. Just one neonic-treated corn seed can have enough active ingredient to kill 250,000 bees or more.
Bees are essential to our food system. They pollinate 1 in 3 bites of food that we eat and are responsible for pollinating 80% of the world's flowering plants. Now, once you start losing bees, you start losing food that is affordable, readily available, and healthy.
People ask us all the time, don't we need neonics, to be able to grow our food? And the answer is no. There are places across the globe that have already banned this chemical.
There are safe alternatives out there. There are more efficient alternatives out there. And it's just up to us to make sure that our governments choose them.
Every day that we don't take action, the problem gets worse. And we need to take action to protect our pollinators, our water, our food systems, our ecosystems, and ourselves.
He says in verse 4, the earth is mourning. We can see that right now. The land can't produce. It's being destroyed by the lust in the heavens as well as the lust on earth. He says in verse 5, the earth is also defiled. Any doctor, any veterinarian, anyone that has any knowledge of the soil at all, brethren, call your county extension agent. I'm sure he can tell you that our soil is so depleted. And they'll tell you, bring a sample of it in, and we'll take a soil test, and we will tell you what artificial stuff we can sell you in order to get your land to produce. It's defiled. It's hurting. The earth is hurting, and it can no longer feed the people, Yahweh says. And that's exactly what the reports are coming in. How many reports do we have to see before we start believing what Yahweh said?
The soil is home to billions of beneficial creatures.
This symbiosis is very important for the soil's immune system. You can think of these mycorrhizal fungi as a dense network in the soil.
But the vast majority of our soils are sick because for decades industrial agriculture has used highly toxic pesticides to maximize yields. The practice is killing bees and many other beneficial organisms. Among the poisons in the spotlight is a type that's been on the market for a long time, neonicotinoids.
You see this red dust? That's what's rubbed off. The coating that's no longer on the grain of corn has gone into the environment.
Until 1988, Sepp Braun used pesticides and mineral fertilizers on his fields. But the Chernobyl disaster and the construction of the new Munich airport made him think twice. Today, he knows that there are more living organisms in a handful of soil than there are people on Earth.
For me, the soil is really a living being, comparable to our plants, animals, or even our fellow humans. So I handle it very, very carefully.
Soil is a veritable kingdom of organisms, many of them microscopic. Most of them have just one role, to decompose dead material like leaves, roots, or even animals. The soil is like a giant stomach that digests everything. Woodlice and springtails break up larger pieces. Roundworms and single-cell organisms take care of smaller ones. Bacteria and fungi colonize the material. Earthworms eat, dig tunnels, fertilize, and aerate the soil. All this results in particularly fertile humus containing minerals and nutrients important for plant growth. About 10% of Germany's arable land is cultivated to organic standards, including Sepp Braun's farm. But most of the rest are monocultures. Their soils are often nutrient poor, with vulnerable crops that need pesticides to protect them from pests. These products are safe, according to the manufacturers. These products are safe, according to the manufacturers.
Well, now they found themselves wrong, and this is always the case. They always find out that what they thought was safe, it turns out it's not safe.
This is the fertile Breisgau region near Freiburg in Germany's southwest. There's abundant pollen and nectar here. No wonder Christoph Koch has been bringing his bees here for many years. Koch is a sixth-generation beekeeper.
They're fantastic creatures. Every bee here knows what its role is. Imagine, it's pitch black inside, and they make such precise honeycombs, accurate to the millimeter. And they're such small animals. Each one knows what to do, no one complains. They dance for joy when they're allowed to collect honey. When they're working, bees are so undemanding.
The beekeeper almost never had problems with pesticides until one spring day in 2008. The beekeeper almost never had problems with pesticides until one spring day in 2008.
We see another thing taking place. I brought out years ago how the crops were being genetically altered. And now this they didn't intend to get out of the laboratory, but somehow or another it got out of the laboratory. And of course it spread throughout the land, the wind currents and so forth. And we got plants now that the bees will swarm around, but they don't know what to do with the pollen that's in it, because the pollen is a strange pollen that has something in it that it's like putting some pollen on your face, and the bee will swarm around it, but he won't partake of it because it's got flesh there too. Well, that's what we're seeing in a lot of the plants that are coming up now. That's the reason that there's many nations that won't allow these genetically altered grains to come into them. But the United States is pushing them to accept these things into their country. Some villagers said that they were never told it was genetically engineered and did not know that it was creating its own pesticide. Now, this was one where they actually used this, where the plant itself would create a pesticide. Now, you know, it looks like any fool would know that if you create a pesticide that will kill, what's the first thing that touches that plant when the pollen starts coming out? Are bees. And of course, you know, this starts cutting down, but not only the bees, other wildlife is being harmed here too. It actually goes along with this, and they're going to use food in part of the process of converting people to the Catholic Church, and of course to Mary. They're going to try to cut off the food supply, I do believe. In fact, I think that's why GM is allowed to do what they're doing, I think that it was a planned thing, and I think they know exactly what it's going to bring about. The Vatican, I wanted to speak on this right here. I wanted to bring this out. The Vatican has stunned opponents. It says, Vatican says GM food is a blessing. The Vatican has stunned opponents of genetically modified foods by declaring they hold the answer to the world's starvation and malnutrition. Well, they certainly do. They hold the keys to starving the people to death and for bringing them the worst food ever. But in verse 7, he says, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines. Famines, of course, is a scarcity of food that you can live on. Right now, we're suffering here in the United States of people who have a lack of food, and throughout the world. There's thousands or millions of people dying each year because of it. But now it's going to get shorter than that even, according to the prophecies here. It all starts, it started right now. And a few years ago, I told you about the population of the honeybees and how they were dying. Well, recently it has picked up. And of course, the people are getting desperate now to find out why. And I believe that they know why. I believe that the ones who caused this know why, that the honeybees are dying. And I believe it's all part of this same scheme to depopulate the earth. But it says U.S. honeybee dies off. There's the way it is working today in places to where they raise apples, where they have certain crops, especially in the up north where they have few bees, maybe not any. They take bees because bees are the best pollinators they are. You can do it by artificial means, by creating winds that that will blow the pollen loose and spread it, but it doesn't do it as efficiently as a bee. If you took the bees or got rid of the bees, you would lose probably 50% of your crop. And this is what they're looking at right now, billions of dollars that are going to be lost here in food, but also billions of dollars worth of food that is desperately needed throughout the world now, with almost nothing in stockpile except in a few places where they have stored food for the politicians that I've told you about years ago. But it says honeybees are responsible for approximately 1/3 of the United States crop pollination, including such species as peaches, soybeans, apples, pears, pumpkins, cucumbers, cherries, raspberries, blackberries, and strawberries. Now, where they don't have a population of bees, they have corporations that have created large numbers of beehives, and they for a price will ship these bees to wherever they are needed, and they'll pollinate the land. They'll pick them up there, take them to another location, and pollinate. That's the reason we have so many apples. We're able to raise so many apples now, where we were only able to raise a few years ago before this started. And so but like one corporation, they had 3,000 hives, and in 2 months' time, they had 800 left. Now, that's how fast they are diminishing now. So you can see why that some people are getting upset about it.
The beekeeper almost never had problems with pesticides until one spring day in 2008. A new pest was threatening the huge cornfields in the Rhine Valley. To save the crops, authorities approved the widespread use of a new kind of pesticide, neonicotinoids.
A corn farmer was sowing in front of me, and then, one moment, the bees just stopped flying. It was beautiful weather, nectar gathering time. Everything was wonderful. And while the farmer made his tracks, it just stopped. No more bees.
The poison cloud killed 12,000 colonies in just 2 days. More than 500 million bees died an agonizing death.
It was the world's biggest bee poisoning by legal means since the advent of bee conservation. It was hugely frustrating and emotional. It really got to me. I couldn't even get to the bees anymore because of the smell of decaying bees when I drove up to the apiary. I couldn't get over it.
During sowing, the red pesticide had broken away from the corn grains and spread into the environment.
It was sown in with the crop,
Here are the corn grains treated with insecticides.
What was the problem?
You see this red dust? That's what's rubbed off. The coating that's no longer on the corn grain has gone into the environment.
And it killed the bees immediately?
Some of them. The flying bees that flew through the fog died immediately. The really bad thing was that the dust also got on the pollen of flowering plants. Then the bees collected the contaminated pollen.
The seeding method was supposed to be a revolutionary development in safe pesticide use. Instead of being sprayed, the poison was almost always coated onto the seed. Machines then planted the seeds in the soil, allowing the neonicotinoids to act on the plant from root to stem. This makes the crop immune to pests both below and above ground. But something had gone wrong. The Agriculture Ministry was charged with investigating the bee deaths. Beekeepers were astonished when the seeding machines were blamed as the main cause. That was also the position of Bayer, the pesticide manufacturer. Even so, neonicotinoids were banned in Germany, but only for use on corn. Bayer offered beekeepers emergency aid of 2.2 million euros, but only on one condition. In return, I relinquish all existing or future claims for damages to the state of Baden-Württemberg. The investigating authority would now become the compensation middleman. It was also strange that Bayer's emergency aid was submitted via the Agriculture Ministry.
The state of Baden-Württemberg and Bayer wanted to buy their way out. Of course, it was sold as immediate aid for beekeepers. The joke was that there was so much pressure to settle quickly. But actually, if there hadn't been any poisoning, then we would have waited a lot longer before we saw a financial return.
Many beekeepers accepted the compensation. For Bayer, the ban on using the insecticides on corn was bearable because they could still be used on many other crops. In Germany alone, about 3,700 tons of the ingredient were sold between 1992 and 2017. Bayer and other manufacturers, such as Syngenta, supply these insecticides to over 100 countries, a trade worth billions of euros. Scientists accuse the producers of putting profits before the environment. That's because studies show that neonicotinoids don't just kill pests. Dutch researcher Henk Tennekes spent years studying the topic. He concluded that there's never been a more dangerous insecticide. Bee deaths are just a symptom. The whole environment is affected. We meet Tennekes in a clinic. He agreed to see us despite suffering from pneumonia.
Neonicotinoids are water-soluble and relatively mobile in soil. So when it rains, they're easily washed into the groundwater and surface water. So they spread throughout the environment. They're taken in by wild-growing plants too, through the roots. This leads to a whole landscape that's toxic for insects. One can assume that there will be a die-off of insects. And when the insects disappear, the system collapses and it's ecological Armageddon. We're about to destroy all of nature.
Henk Tennekes is convinced that neonicotinoids are the main factor in declining insect numbers worldwide. And because of the food chain, he also believes they're responsible for the deaths of birds, reptiles, and amphibians. What's more, there's evidence that they harm humans. So why are these insecticides being sold? In fact, since 2018, the European Union has withdrawn approval for 3 out of 5 neonicotinoids because of the bees. But France had banned a product containing these poisons back in 1999. Why did French authorities act so much earlier? And another pressing question, if these pesticides are causing so much damage above ground, what impact do they have on life in and below the topsoil, on earthworms? centipedes, and the other organisms that decompose matter. Surprisingly, there are few studies on how pesticides affect life in the soil. Healthy soil provides roots with everything they need. Tiny fungi called mycorrhizae help. They live in symbiosis with 80% of all land plants. The plant supplies the fungus with sugar to build cells. In return, it receives nutrients like phosphate to grow. Scientists see a large number of mycorrhizal fungi as a sign of particularly healthy soil.
This symbiosis is very important for the soil's immune system. You can think of these mycorrhizal fungi as a dense network in the soil. They exist partially around the roots, protecting them from pathogens and other harmful organisms.
Interference from outside, such as plowing the soil too deeply or using pesticides, attacks the fungal network. That can destroy its cooperation with the plants. Only about 10% of organisms living in the soil have been identified. But that knowledge is already benefiting organic farming. Europe's pesticide market is dominated by the corporations Bayer, BASF and Syngenta. About 1,000 pesticides are registered for use in Germany, including herbicides, fungicides and insecticides. Around 90,000 tons of pesticides are sold here every year. A pesticide consists of a toxic active ingredient and a secondary ingredient that's often also toxic and can make the active ingredient water-soluble, for example. Well-known active ingredients include glyphosates and neonicotinoids. These nerve agents are the cause of massive bee mortality. In the summer of 2008, about 500 million bees were poisoned in Breisgau. It had long been suspected that neonicotinoids kill not only pests, but also other species. Nevertheless, manufacturers, including the insecticides inventor Bayer, were able to keep it on the market. Jean-Marc Bonmatin works at one of France's most prestigious government research institutes. He was one of the first to critically examine neonicotinoids. In the mid-1990s, the Agriculture Ministry commissioned the toxicologist to shed light on the mysterious deaths of bees. Bayer's neonicotinoid imidacloprid was under suspicion. Bonmatin says that Bayer employees were also involved in the study at the request of the ministry.
I think it's normal for a company like Bayer to be informed that a study is underway on one of its products. But it's absolutely not normal that representatives of that company, whose products must ultimately be decided on, are involved in the study design down to the last detail, including funding and even the publication of the final results.
The study called for bees to be sent to sunflower fields treated with neonicotinoids and also to control fields without any insecticides, one area with the poisons and one without. At least that's what Jean-Marc Bonmatin and his colleagues thought. They were to analyze only the fields treated with the Bayer poison, but not the control field. But later they noticed that the control field was also contaminated with an insecticide.
We scientists complained about this series of experiments when we saw that the control fields had been treated with fungicides and other insecticides. That didn't seem normal for a test of this quality, but the studies committee wouldn't hear our complaint. We now know the comparative study was worthless, but at the time its results were interpreted as showing that imidacloprid was harmless to bees.
In the public eye, the poisons were suddenly above suspicion, and a ban was off the table for the time being. But Jean-Marc Bonmatin's institute undertook its own studies on behalf of beekeepers, this time without Bayer. The results were clear.
Nous avons démontré par la suite qu'effectivement,
we were subsequently able to show that the corn, sunflowers, pollen, nectar, water, everything concerned with the bees was contaminated. We showed that the levels that could be found out in the world were so high that they were sufficient to kill bees, or at least cause severe long-term effects.
Meanwhile, other studies deepened suspicions that neonicotinoids could be harmful to other organisms too. In Munich's Botanical Garden, we meet Francisco Sanchez Basho. The toxicologist traveled here from Australia. He caused a global sensation with a major study on insect mortality. The results are alarming.
So when you published your study at the beginning of this year, what was the conclusion?
We found that in the countries where this has been studied, which is mostly European, American, but also countries around the world like Brazil or Japan, 40% of the species of insects are declining, and among those, 1/3 of them are really declining rapidly, and they are threatened with extinction.
He too believes that neonicotinoids play a big role, not just in killing insects, but in causing major damage to entire ecosystems. Sanchez Basho demonstrated this studying irrigated rice fields in Japan between 2002 and 2004. These ecosystems are also home to water fleas, crayfish, and a further particular type of fish. One day, rice farmers noticed that except for the water fleas, many other animals, especially the crayfish, were dead. A team at Chiba University were asked to investigate. Before long, the same neonicotinoid that had killed bees in France came under suspicion.
We nevertheless observed a very curious thing. The Medaka that were in the mesocosms treated with imidacloprid were absolutely all, 100% of the fish were contaminated with a protozoan parasite. And of course, we put it down to the fact that imidacloprid, like other neonicotinoids, inhibits the immune system. So it's all species were sensitive to the insecticide, except Daphnia. So that was the unusual thing. So Daphnia was an anomaly. And the unfortunate fact is that this anomaly had been used as the reason to say that this insecticide was safe for the environment, when it was a complete anomaly.
So the toxin was killing much larger species. It weakened their immune systems enough to make them highly vulnerable to parasites. Another factor is that most of the subsidies continue to support industrial agriculture, and that has a deep and lasting impact. That's because pesticides often remain in the soil for a long time. In Switzerland's Bernese Oberland region, groundwater is taken from underneath fields. For many decades, limits on pesticides in drinking water weren't exceeded. But for a few years now, there's been a problem with the fungicide. For water engineer Roman Wiggert, it's a serious situation.
This
water tower supplies up to 100,000 people here in the district. All the catchments have a problem with chlorothalonil residues. This intake here complies with all regulations for consumption. But even the distance of about 400 meters to the next intake is enough to raise the level of the most concentrated chlorothalonil residue considerably.
Next to the fields, the Aare Canal flows. From here, water seeps into the ground through bank filtration. At the extraction point beside the water, no pesticides are measurable. But on the way to the water tower, the groundwater is gradually contaminated by agriculture.
The Food Safety Authority says the drinking water can still be consumed without any problem. But of course, the fact that the maximum level has been exceeded is unsettling for people.
Another problem is significant nitrate pollution thanks to fertilization. Like in many regions of Europe, multi-million euro purification systems are now being planned to clean the drinking water. The problem is that the pesticide residues that are filtered out end up being discharged back into rivers.
Langzeitschäden stehen da ganz klar im Vordergrund, weil die Dosen.
The focus is clearly on long-term damage. The doses are relatively small, and they get consumed every day, or at least frequently. But over time, they have an effect. We excrete part of these toxins, but part of them gets stored in our body. They remain there, and they also remain active. Over time, the harmful effects build up, and the diseases simply increase. You could call it a civilization of diseases.
Many independent studies have linked pesticide use to cancers and neurological diseases like Parkinson's.
You will be eating the unclean, you will be causing global warming, you're going to bring all of this stuff upon yourself if you don't follow Yahweh. The way to correct this, you've screwed it up, now you've got to unscrew it or it will never stop. You're the cause of the problem. You've got to convert yourself or the microorganisms can't convert. They can't convert until you do the converting, till you repent and do the converting. And then we can turn this around, and the microorganisms that clean our ocean, that clean our air, will come back to this wonderful earth that Yahweh made. With consumption, with fever, with inflammation, scorching heat, yes, it's going to get worse than this. I'm telling all the lands out there, listen to me, you British Isles, you islands, all the nations, listen to me. I'm telling you, there's no way to do this, there's no way to undo this except repent and convert and start following Yahweh's laws. This will turn it around. Start preaching the peaceful solution with me. Get it in the schools. Get it in the governments now. You'll be plagued with the sword. Yes, Isaiah 2 shows that just turning to Yahweh's laws, the people will start beating their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. With sword, with blasting, you know, people say, well, that's blasting of the wind. No, the wind doesn't call a fallout. It doesn't cause fallout to come down upon you, a fallout dust, and that's what it's speaking of here if you just read the rest of it. Read the scriptures, and it will show you, no, it's blasting from explosions. And this one is the nuclear bomb, and the dust that comes down upon you will destroy you if you'll just read the rest of it. If you'll read the rest of it, then maybe you can convert, you can start unscrewing what you've screwed up. That's the essence of the full story right there. You have ruined it, and the only way to straighten it out is to turn, repent, and then our microbes, they will turn, they will convert. They'll go back to doing their jobs the way they used to do it, when the earth was beautiful and successful, and the people lived 1,000 years or more. That's what we've taken away from ourselves. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you!